Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Sisters Speak, and today we're going to be talking about Muslims in the media. And Alhamdulillah, I am joined by my co-host, Sister Ruweyda, and also a special guest, Sister Elif. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Alaikum salam. I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for choosing me to join this podcast today. I'm really excited.
No, Jazakallah for coming. I believe you have some interest/experience in journalism and writing. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. I work as a community reporter, so a journalist for Newcastle Chronicle. Also have experiences in journalism before actually starting to work as a journalist. Have studied at university, graduated in media and journalism. So an area that I really have high interest in.
Wow, mashallah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And assalamu alaikum to all our listeners today. And just a little disclaimer before we start our show. The show is called Sisters Speak, and we do focus on issues affecting young Muslims living in the West, especially. But we do welcome both our brothers and our sisters to tune in and engage in the show. And please be aware that we are not experts or professionals, so we will only be answering questions that are relevant to the show, and will only answer those that we have knowledge on. But please like, subscribe to all of our channels, and do tell us your views or answers our questions in the comments. So let's just get straight in with Muslims in the media, starting with, I think, newspapers, which is the most basic or like the first type of media that we probably had. Sister Ruweyda, what do you think about how Muslims are portrayed in newspapers or in the news in general?
I think in general we are misrepresented pretty harshly on newspapers, in the media in general. Since 9/11, there's been a real push from the mainstream media to push this narrative that Muslims are the ones who commit acts of terror or extremism, etc. And we all know this isn't something from Islam, obviously. And I think it really negatively affects us, especially young people. Because if you think about it, I was born in the late 90s. I'm sure you guys were as well. And literally all of our lives, because 9/11 happened in the early 2000s, right? So all of our lives, all we've heard about Muslims in media is that we're violent, we're extremists, we commit acts of terror, etc. And I feel like it really has a negative effect on us. And depending on your upbringing, alhamdulillah, I would say that all three of us have had good upbringings. But if you don't have someone that you can turn to and someone that can help you establish a strong Muslim identity that is actually, Islamic, you might end up hating your own identity, and it can be really negative. Or on the flip side, you might even ascribe to that form of Islam that, or Muslims that we might see represented in media. So I think either way, the negative representation of Muslims in media can have a really negative impact. I don't know if Elif or you, Ikram, have anything to add to that.
I'd be interested to hear what Elif has to say.
Yes. Well, newspapers have many times portrayed Muslims in quite an Islamophobic manner on their front covers. Like Ruweyda was saying, after 9/11, there has been an increase of Islamophobic representation of Muslims, especially relating Muslims to terrorism, making Muslims appear as backwards minded, oppressed, not fitting into the British society, being the odd ones in British society. Some examples I could give, not naming the newspapers, but for instance, 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadis. This is like a good example of how Muslims are being portrayed as supporting something that, is not good. It's generalizing them. There's another one as well, not naming the newspaper. MP's anger as Christian girl forced into Muslim foster care. So here it's just showing like comparisons of two different groups and how Muslims are the oppressors. But newspaper-wise, depending on which newspaper, you can see a lot more, I would say, hate towards Muslim groups, whereas some can be more in the middle. Newspaper covers nowadays, I wouldn't say that as bad as they were probably 10 to 20 years ago. But the thing is when you go in a newsroom, especially a print media newsroom, probably more like 10 years ago, there probably wasn't any Muslims in that newsroom. You would obviously have a more white male dominated group of journalists who would have a say of what to be put on the cover, what text would be attached to the image that will be put on the cover. So you won't really have, let's say, a Muslim there to put a stop to what was written or what photos were attached to it. Whereas now we're slowly starting to see more Muslims getting involved with the way Muslims are being represented on newspaper, print, or it could be on digital, such as TV, radio, or social media like websites as well. So yeah, I feel like most newspaper covers so far have gave evidences of Islamophobia.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry, Ikram. I
No,
just
you go
I
on.
just wanted to add something to what you said, Elif, about the representation that we have of Muslims now, like working in journalism and things like what you do. I think it's really important that we encourage the young people of today to go for those kinds of jobs as well, because as you said, like 10 years ago, there wasn't that many Muslims in those fields. So we didn't have a voice. But now slowly we're starting to get one. And I feel like, I don't know about you, Elif, or you, Ikram, but sometimes I feel like, from my culture especially, people really put down those kind of career choices, and they say, "Oh, medicine or engineering or something like that," and they really put down those career choices like political and law and even like media. And I think we need more Muslims in those spaces. Ikram, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially with something that affects, I think, our religion a lot more than other religions, it is important to have Muslims in that spaces and in those spaces, and also Muslims that are going to be helpful to the community rather than harmful. So people who are going to be helpful to the community rather than harmful. And also, this doesn't even have to come from Muslims themselves. I think the media, especially now, is becoming more sly in the way it portrays Muslims, because back then they would just state it, they would just say, oh, X is a terrorist, or like X terrorist did this. Whereas now it's more like indirect, like you notice in the way they phrase things. So they may just say something like, man who has a Muslim cousin does XX. So it's not as apparent as it used to be, but it's still there. And all of this just instills fear in our Muslim communities and also outside of Muslim communities, because I think, especially as Muslims, we overestimate how much non-Muslims know about Islam. We assume that they know all about Islam, or at least they know the foundations, which isn't actually true. And I think we also forget that a lot of people, especially when you take into consideration the older generation, and I'm not calling people who are over 25 old, I'm just saying like that type of age group, majority of their media does come from news and the newspapers as well. I don't know if Ella, if you have anything that you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, media has quite a dominant role in society. It's a very powerful tool to communicate to society, and it can really shape people's mindset. So, having more Muslims in the media, and media does not mean just journalism, it could be different fields of media, uh, gives more Muslim voices, which can change the way Muslims are represented. Because the way Muslims have been represented, especially after 9/11, like I had said previously, has been very white, like a white dominated way of viewing the Muslims. Like Muslims are seen as strange, like they're not fitting into the British society. Like that's like the way most of the time Muslims have been portrayed. And you can see this a lot when you watch films, Hollywood films specifically. It can be very vocal in films because they get very stereotyped. But I feel like the best way to change the future of how Muslims are represented in the media is to get more Muslims to think of, oh, I want to be a journalist, or oh, I want to make a change with how, for instance, the refugees are represented on TV, or might have a different interest on how I can make Muslim women who wear hijab, look more better, sound more better. Or it could be on TV as well. So I think that's basically one of my main things that I would really like to say as a journalist myself, who doesn't see a lot of Muslims within the newsroom, is to encourage more Muslims to consider to work in the field of media.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, Elif. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think another way, I was trying to think of ways that we can maybe improve the image of Muslims in media. And I think one thing in particular is Muslims are overly represented as a group of people that commit acts of terror, and terrorism is often linked to Muslims. When a non-Muslim commits an act of terror, then it's usually due to mental health or something other than their religion is brought into it, basically. So I think what needs to happen is we need a definition for terrorism, something that's transparent, something that's publicly accepted, and something that is consistently applied, whether the person is black, white, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever. It's I feel like we need that as well, and that comes under the legislation, maybe like government. Um, but yeah, I definitely think that could, like, at least remove some of the bias that comes around Muslims being represented as people who commit acts of terror. Um,
Jazakallah for that, Ruweyda, and Jazakallah for all of those um, contributions. We have a nice comment here from Muhammad Hamdan who says, she is right. I think he's referring to you, Elif, that Muslim people need backup on this sort of thing, which is very true. At the end of the day, sometimes we have to include ourselves in spaces and like force our way into spaces for us to see for there to be a change. Now, we've talked about newspapers, moving on to television, and we're going to specifically be focusing on the ideas of, at least initially, the savior complex slash liberating a Muslim female, because when like researching this topic, this was something that we all identified as something that was very, very common, especially in television, more so in television and in movies than in newspapers. I have always seen this sort of obsession with the Muslim woman like taking off her hijab or like becoming liberated through the removal of hijab. Like in a show about doctors and hospitals, and I don't even watch this TV show. I saw a clip of it being advertised. A patient was bleeding out, and keep in mind, this is in a hospital, okay? And this is a doctor. You are in a hospital with tons of medical equipment. This is probably the best place to be bleeding to death. And the doctor shouts that she needs a tourniquet. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's basically the medical word for an equipment that stops bleeding or helps to reduce bleeding. And not even up to 5 seconds after shouting that, she literally just yeets off her hijab. She just removes it and uses that to stop the bleed instead. And imagine my face. I was just like face palming because I was like, how silly is this? She's in a hospital, she's a doctor in a hospital surrounded by all of this medical equipment, and yet they're still they still feel like it's necessary for her to remove her hijab to be used as an equipment instead. So I've just always noticed that. And you also have, the idea that once the woman removes her hijab, she's free, she's liberated, she's saved. Suddenly, everyone notices her. She goes from being the quiet person to the confident person where everyone suddenly notices her. That's when she becomes intelligent. That's when she's so much more beautiful. And what do you think about this, Elif?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we do see quite commonly. I mean, it is if you're watching British TV, like I said earlier, it is going to be from a viewpoint that is dominated the most, which is, white British people. So it will view the world outside of the UK in a way they see it. So when it comes to the Muslim countries, Middle East, it could be certain parts of Africa as well, including parts of Asia, you will have. I mean, I personally always see that they show, like, I'm Turkish, so I always feel like when they show Turkey, even though Turkey is very diverse, especially Istanbul, you see a lot of women that they tend to focus on with their camera who are covered from top to bottom. But it's very diverse, you see, in Istanbul. It's like they want to show, I'm giving Istanbul as an example here, Istanbul as a certain angle, a certain way. And that's like through looking through the camera with that eye lens. Like they want to show a certain Muslim city, country in a way that they want to show. And then they kind of show it in a way where the country is not very developed. It's in poverty, and there's political issues. Like the way they like to show probably most Middle Eastern countries is in that way. Um, there's more of like a I don't know how to put it, but like they focus more on like the negative sides than the positive sides of like for instance, like a Muslim country that is like Turkey, when there's a lot more things that they could have focused on. I watched a documentary with BBC One a few months back. I think it was filmed just before the COVID, and that's exactly what I had saw. I was so excited to sit and watch it, and I did enjoy it, but I was like, why are they focusing on such, like negative things when there's so many rich things to talk about when it comes to Istanbul? And the focus on mosques was nice, but it's like the way they portray mosques and the worshipping, it comes across as like strange. Um, it's like the white presenter will walk in and just sit and observe, but the way it's like messaged out is like, this is strange, this is weird. So that's one thing that I always pick up on when I watch any documentary about any Muslim country is you see this, white presenter going in and feeling super alienated and not feeling like they're comfortable in some sense as well. So it's like they like to show, obviously, a certain group of people, like Muslims, or it could be like different coloured, or depending on what they're wearing as well. But there's always that we are different kind of message behind it. So that's kind of my viewpoint on this kind of certain subject.
Jazakallah for that, Elif. I think as well, what I've also noticed is that a lot of the times it's not actually the white people doing that. It's not actually the white people creating, or like not the white people, sorry. It's not like the Western people creating that, like you said. Like a lot of the times when you look at the producers of those films or movies, or the actors or actresses, they would have collaborated with people who seem to have Muslims names, or may even identify themselves as Muslims, which is why I think the right representation or the right person is also very important. Because sometimes at the end of the day, the type of scenes or things that they may want the person to act out, you won't necessarily find that in the typical, what if you want to call them the typical practicing Muslim. So I think it's not also like one viewpoint a lot of the times, because they're still using people who have a connection to the religion or some type of background or history with the religion. What do you think, Ruweyda?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I remember, as you were saying that, I remember I watched a TV series where one of the characters was portrayed as Muslim. He was brown, so I don't know if he was actually Muslim or not. But yeah, he was portrayed, he was in a scene, he was doing the sujood, and then someone calls him, and then suddenly he's up out of sujood and answering that person. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, how could no one in the whole team, in the producer team, know that when a Muslim is called to, even if they're praying, they're not going to answer your call? You know what I mean? But it happened, and I found it really funny. I rewinded it like 10 times and rewatched it again and again because I just found it hilarious. But it does show that we do need Muslim voices in these spaces, because then at least there'd be someone there to tell them that's not how Muslims pray. If someone is calling me while I'm praying, I'm not going to get up in the middle of it and answer the call. But yeah, definitely, just to go back to how Muslims are represented in media, um, I think this whole idea, this whole savior complex thing, it stems from the days of colonization and the Crusades, where Muslims were being, where Western countries were being, forced to take on Eastern countries were being forced to take on Western ideologies and Western ideas, Western religions, Western clothing, Western languages. And, this is the case in a lot of countries across Africa and Europe, Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So definitely, I think that's where it came from. That's where that whole idea of liberating the Muslim woman came from. We do have a few comments here.
Before we read out the comments, actually, I just want to add to that as well. I think you're right. I think this whole idea of like minorities in general being saved has been something that is like has always been like paramount within like society, especially like the Western society. And you see it especially in like how they portray like relationships, like not even like Muslim relationships. For example, Pocahontas. Like if you find the original story of Pocahontas is nothing like the Disney story at all. It's the actual complete opposite. And you still see this as well in TV, where the Muslim female, they portray this idea of the woman needing to be rescued by a non-Muslim man, and like he's saving her from her religion, her culture, her practices, and he's making her come away from Islam. And there's nothing wrong with different religions, but why is it always the Muslim woman that is leaving her religion, and in leaving that religion she's suddenly better off. And I think at the end of the day, all of this just ends up promoting like haram ideas. Like for example, like it ends up promoting like relationships outside of marriage, or like premarital sexual relations. So like it ends up pushing out so many bad ideas that can have an effect on impressionable minds, especially if the character is designed in a way to be relatable. Like, for example, if the character is wearing a scarf, everyone does go through tests, and there are some issues in these TV shows and things that some people may be struggling with. But I think in the media, it's just seen as something that's constant, and it's also seen as something that we should give into and just like do, rather than like and just like shirk our religion off for all these other haram things, rather than turning to Allah, or actually seeking practical help.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And I checked this. There was this very interesting article that I was reading. These two Muslims developed a test to check, to measure whether a the portrayal of a Muslim in a film or TV show is, you know, correct, or is it actually incorrect. And they have like these 5 questions that, if the answer is yes to any of these questions, then obviously this Muslim portrayal is negative. So, for example, the first question is the character talking about the victim of or the perpetrator of terrorism? Is the character presented as irrationally angry? Um, is the character presented as superstitious, culturally backwards, or anti-modern? Is the character presented as a threat to the Western way of life? And if the character is a male, is he presented as misogynistic? Or if female, is she presented as oppressed by her male counterparts? And these people who made this test, they conducted a study where they tested certain films and TV shows to see if they would pass or fail this test. And they did one test where literally, where one TV show failed all 5 of the criteria within the first 12 minutes of the first episode. So it's pretty shocking, like how badly Muslims are represented. Um, but yeah, Ikram, should we move on?
Yeah, 100%. Um, Now we're going to move on to something that I think plays a big part of everyone's lives, and that is social media. And the first question that we're going to ask is, social media, do we need it? Aleph, I'm going to start with you. Do you think we need social media?
Well, especially in the day of age we're living now, yes. However, if we could live without social media, could we? Yes. However, personally, I don't think I could live without social media. I have tried, and I really struggled. For me, social media is like how in the olden days they would read a newspaper every morning. For me, it's just like I need to go on my Instagram. I need to go on my Facebook. I need to see what's on my timeline. I need to see if anyone sent me a message. So in that way, personally for me, I don't think I could ever live without it. And if I try, it'd probably only be like a few weeks max. So yeah, that's me with my social media.
I agree with you. I'm not against social media at all. I think the idea of like ban social media, etc., is just a bit like exaggerated to me, because just like anything in life, it's about moderation, and it has its positives and its negatives. And the way social media is designed, to a large extent, a very large extent, it is how you use it and what you surround yourself with. That is what the social media like produces for you, which can be both a positive but also a negative as well. And I think, especially we've seen with COVID, it does have a lot of positive like elements to it. Like for example, for a lot of companies, it was through social media that they were able to keep them afloat. And like without social media, this show, Sister Speak, shout out to Sister Speak, this show would actually, like, our show wouldn't exist because we wouldn't have YouTube, we wouldn't have the platform to like broadcast our show and like reach out to so many people. And so similar to you, Elif, I think we could live without social media because there was a time we lived without it as well. But I think in some ways it is a really good asset for us. And because of the way life is built now, for example, with marketing, with selling, with producing, to just suddenly like get rid of that would actually like probably do a lot more like damage. What about you, Ruweyda?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you guys have said, there are benefits to social media. There are also negatives to social media. We all know, like, people get addicted to it, people spend too much time on it, people end up with mental health issues because comparison and things like that. But at the same time, businesses use it, Sisters Speak exists because of it. There's also like so much information that we can get from social media that is useful. So definitely, it's one of those things that, as the Beehive has written here, it's a blessing in disguise. And yeah, if we use it right, definitely I agree with that comment.
No, 100%. And we see it in a lot of movements as well. It's because of social media, a lot of things have actually changed. We saw it happen a lot last year in like in relation to like certain movements and things. So it is very useful. So now moving on to representation on social media. And when we're talking about representation, we're talking about like influencers. So that could be like your YouTubers, like us. Um, that could be like your Instagrammers, your bloggers, etc. So we put a question up on the screen. Muslim influencers, yay or nay? Give us your thoughts, please. And we just want to also ask, like, do we think that it is it the right type of representation? Are we showing that we're confident in our Muslim identities, or are we trying to fit in? What do you think, Ruweyda?
I think there's a mixture of both, isn't there? There is some good representation from Muslim influences, positive influences, but at the same time, we do also get negative influences, and I feel like, I don't know, it just depends on the person, it depends on the individual. It's really difficult because, yeah, because on one hand, it's like we're not supposed to judge people, but on the other hand, I think because social media is such a public thing, it's such a something that's available to everyone. Everyone can, if you don't privatize your posts or whatever, everyone can see what your output is, what your social media output is, and it kind of depends on the individual. Um, yeah. What about you, Elif? Anything to add to that?
Well, with social media, I'm just thinking right now of obviously Instagram, because I guess Instagram is the go-to place when you want to like get to know a certain influencer. You like stroll through all their pictures and even stories and everything that they post out. Uh, I don't know. I'm kind of always in between because I have came across certain Muslim women influencers who are, you know, um, wearing hijab, and they raise issues if there's something going on. Like, for example, issues that are happening in Palestine. So they'll put like Free Palestine on their stories. So they don't like remain quiet, like they will speak up. But then you have the other hand, where I guess they tend to remain silent because they don't want to use their platform for those kind of things. Uh, their platform is mostly talking about, the sponsors that they have. So they'll sponsor like certain clothes, outfits, hijabs, because that's just the way they make their money. For them, their Instagram account is their business. So I guess it just all comes down to the way their intentions are when it comes to using social media. And a lot of Muslim hijabi women nowadays use social media as a tool to, sell. So, and not a lot of them are using it for, I guess, Islamic reasons, but more for like purposes to get people to buy and be more invested in their lifestyle, to see the way they spend their day, what they have for breakfast. So yeah, it's like one of those things where for some it's like, oh yeah, I love that, and I would like to know what she is doing on holiday. But then for some it's be like, I don't care about that. And some people might be a little bit uncomfortable or might judge and go, as a Muslim woman, you shouldn't really be, showing your life like that, kind of thing. But I think it just all comes down to the viewer. Everyone's different, everyone has a different opinion. But I think social media can be used for good more than for bad, to be fair. I know some people may not think that, but I feel like it's a good way of connecting with people. And like for me personally, I like to look at like certain Muslim women who are living like in different parts of the world, and you can see like their different cultures, different ways of living, and I personally find that really interesting. So for me, I kind of like it. I kind of like watching YouTube videos of different Muslim families out there. It's just interesting to see. So yeah.
Jazakallah for that. We've just had a comment from someone who said, "Could someone please explain to me what exactly Muslim influencers are?" So, just an influencer in general. We've just added the term Muslim to be specific. An influencer is just someone who has the power or the status to affect decisions of others or purchases of others because of their supposed authority. So yeah, to be honest, like I think there's no obviously there is a right and wrong way, for example, not doing haram stuff on social media. So I think as long as you're not doing something haram, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. Like we have a comment from Wahab Guja who says that I am using social media for work like a freelancer. Like I have like a food account as well where I post my food. And like, none of that is like posting like your food or something to me anyway. It's not haram. But I think what happens with social media is that what is allowed and not allowed, or what is halal and haram, ends up becoming blurred because there's this sort of feeling when you're using social media that it's not real because you can't truly physically see the effects. Yes, you may make money from it and you will see the money, but you can, once you turn off your phone or once you close the app or delete the app, that's it. You're not engaging with the outcomes of that. So I think, like the sisters have already said, it's both good and bad because especially when like instilling confidence in other people or like engaging with other people. For example, a lot of the times like Muslim women are portrayed mostly on social media as being so free, so confident and so liberated, which is good because it's good for other Muslim women to see Muslim women that are confident in their Muslim identities, that are confident with their religions, that are practicing. However, because that line between like halal and haram is so blurred online, I think it can sometimes teeter on into the negative side because of the examples that people are using, if you get me. So I've seen sometimes what I would regard as disrespectful things done with a hijab to prove to others or to display a certain, message or to sell a certain things. And what they're doing is haram. So, sometimes it doesn't come across as like a confidence, but rather than a compromise. And also, I think as well, we can also promote negative stereotypes on social media. Like, I see this a lot, especially recently. Like, there'll be like a certain trend that like non-Muslims are engaging in, right? And you'll see loads of sisters or like other people making videos such as, oh, if you're lucky I'm a hijabi because I would have bodied this trend, like I would have killed this trend. Or even other people who, in an attempt to bring up Muslim women, they'll be like, oh, you should be grateful that there's Muslim women because otherwise they would have killed this trend. And I think even though it has good intentions because they're trying to like promote Muslim women or like increase our confidence or whatever, it can actually have like the negative effects, because it's like, what are you trying to insinuate? Because essentially, like, they're sexualizing the hijab. Do you know what I mean? They're sexualizing Muslim women, and they're turning our modesty and like our hijab and etc. into something that it's not. So I think we have to just be very careful in what we put out there. This includes me as well, because like I said, it's very, very easy to forget. It's very easy to forget that it does have effects because we can't see them. What about you, Ruweyda?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And obviously, as you said, there's so many negative, um, examples of Muslims maybe not behaving in the correct way. On the flip side, though, you do have a lot of Muslim influencers. I follow one in particular who, mashallah, she's motivated me to start going to the gym. She wears like full niqab, like everything, like himar, everything covered, and she's working out, and it's just really nice to see that kind of, I don't know, empowering and strong Muslim identity um represented on social media. I think it's definitely something that's needed, and something that, maybe will help us counteract the negative representations of Muslims in media and social media in general. Ikram, I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
No, I don't. So we're gonna move on. Jazakallah Amina, she has commented that that is so true, and a lot of like laughing emojis. So Jazakallah for interacting. So we're gonna move on to, actually, this brings us on to um media safety. So we're gonna ask you guys if you have any tips on keeping safe on media, on social media, sorry, and online in general. Please share them in the comments. But Elif, what are your tips for keeping safe on social media?
I guess to keep safe, it's just you need to be careful of what you're sharing, I guess. Like, you don't want to over inform someone, especially if you're public. If you're public and you've just got loads of people just coming onto your, for instance, Instagram account, and they can see everything about you, you don't want to overshare too much of yourself. So, for instance, I'm not a mother, but if I was a mother, I personally wouldn't share my children's faces if I had a public profile. And I know a lot of Instagrammers, or I don't know, like YouTubers, are okay with doing that. But obviously it depends on each parent. It's different. Uh, it's just like certain vulnerable people you wouldn't want to really share for their own safety. Other ways of protecting content, I guess, is just, as Muslims as well, as Muslim women, as a person who wears a hijab, is I, I wouldn't share a picture of me that I wouldn't want everyone to see. So it's just being careful with what kind of content you share, and just making sure you know who sees it as well.
Jazakallah, and we have some comments. So we have the Beehive, who said, similar to Elif, a good tip to staying safe on social media is to keep your account private. And when we say private, we don't just mean like putting on the setting. Like, once you put your account on private, it's better because you have a lot more control in who can access your account. So like, try to like maybe not accept people that you don't know, or strangers or things like that. And then we also have a comment from Wahab Guja, who said that she doesn't show her face or like put on live attendance. She keeps it solely to messages or audio call as well. And what about you, Ruwayda? Do you have any tips to staying safe on social media?
I think one place where we might fall into harm on media, social media, is manipulation. And I think to combat this, it's so important that we seek knowledge and that we seek it from the right sources, and to make sure that we're not falling into manipulation. Like, we've all heard stories of people who have, maybe traveled to different countries, um, to you know so we've all heard these stories of people being manipulated online in social media. And I think it's really important that we try to avoid that. Only follow people that you know. Try to keep your account private, but also try not to make everything known about you as well. We have some comments here by the Beehive. One, she or he has said, think of social media as a digital marketplace instead of your own private space or page. I think that's really important, um, because, as the Beehive has written, it's accessible to anyone all over the world, and definitely it's true. We've had one comment here by Livers that has said, keep accounts private. Don't add random people displaying yourself and life to strangers. You don't know what people are like behind closed doors, Muslim and non Muslim. And definitely, I agree with that. Definitely. Ikram, do you have anything to add?
I was just gonna say, I think this leads on to like another point about like number 2 points actually about disclosing sins and seeking knowledge. So we're gonna first talk about like disclosing sins. So like in Surah Nisa, ayah 148, it says that Allah likes not the open utterance of harsh words unless a man has been wronged. Allah is hearing and all knowing. And there's actually a hadith where Allah is questioning a slave, and like the slave has so many sins, and he's just like, oh, Allah, punish me. And Allah questions how that slave like kept their sins a secret, and because in the dunya, and because they kept their sins a secret, that on this day of judgment, that he's not going to expose their sins in front of everyone, and he will also keep it a secret. And we also know something similar in relation to covering other people's sins. you know we don't need everything to be public. And I think because, like we said earlier, that there's this idea of like a lack of realism with social media, or like a lot of dissociation with social media, because the consequences and effects are not like tangible. People don't realize how much they're disclosing, and like how much they may be like showing. And we also have a comment from Amina who says, share your account as public. Be open about the good you spread to the world in modesty. So she says something really nicely, that if you are going to spread if your account is going to be public, like make sure what you're spreading is good, because we also have to remember that anyone who like follows whatever we say on social media or does whatever we say on social media, you know they're going to we're going to be like questioned about it on day of judgment. Even if we don't know that person, like we're going to be held accountable for it. So we do have to be very careful. And then the second point as well is about seeking knowledge. And we learned this in school. Like when we were kids, we learned about this, to always fact check when we're researching for projects and things. And the same applies to social media. And because you have like inspirational accounts or motivational accounts, or accounts that just post like quotes that even I follow. But at the end of the day, like the Beehive said, you don't know some of these people. You may not know them, you may not know their knowledge or their status or their gender. A lot of the times, like the information that we receive via some of these accounts or social media is like a second-hand account. It's like someone else relaying another piece of information. So we have to be very careful. We have to take everything with a pinch of salt in terms of seeking knowledge, and that applies to other things as well. Like we can't just take word from it. And I think it's very scary that we have to be careful to not allow social media to replace our Quran and our hadiths and our own authentic pieces of knowledge. What do you think about that, Elif?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as Muslims, especially practicing Muslims, we obviously always have to reconsider every, choice we make in life. Make sure our intentions are pure and we're doing it for the sake of Allah, and not for the sake of, viewers or more followers. So if even if your account is private or public, or even if it's just you that sees your own content, like you just need to make sure whatever you share isn't going to displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's many times I took something, I'll take a picture, I'll take a video, and I'm so close to posting it, and I'm like, you know what? No, I don't want to post this, because I just know like it might not be, right for me to post, because you want to be a source of goodness to others. You don't want to be a source of, you know, you don't want to be a source of encouraging others to do something that's not right. So I basically see social media as a tool to actually gain reward as well. Like by sharing, you could be sharing like um, a, a hadith or a verse from the Quran, which might be read by a Muslim or non-Muslim, and it could even start a conversation. And social media can really be a beautiful tool to use to, vocalize Islam, to vocalize and educate others about it.
Yeah, 100%. And just to add to those points on like seeking knowledge in the right places, I do feel like a lot of people turn to social media as a point of knowledge, and they go to perhaps these influencers that they really aspire to be like or that they really like. And then suddenly the influencer does something which is wrong and they're cancelled, and the information, you no longer seek the information from them. But as an ummah, we have to remember, we have to realize that these people are not figures of authority when it comes to looking for Islamic information. A lot of the time, they're not scholars, they're not students of knowledge, they're not any more, they don't have any more authority than me or you, Ikram, or you, no one. Okay, so I think it's really important that we don't idolize these people and that we stick to what we know from the Quran and from the Sunnah. But
A
handing
hundred.
it back to Ikra.
No, 100%. All of those things are very important, and it's all part of keeping safe as well, you know. You have to, like, in protecting both, like, your physical self and as well as your spiritual self, like, you have to be careful in what you take in. And we do have some comments as well. Like, we have a comment from Song One who said, personally, I think you have to work with yourself. For example, turn away when you see something that you shouldn't see. That's lowering our gaze in Islam. We know we have to lower our gaze in Islam. She says, even if you turn your device on private, this doesn't save you. So, all of this is, a part of protection. So things such as, fact checking, keeping our accounts on private, not engaging with people that we don't necessarily know, and also taking everything with like a pinch of salt, because as the Beehive says that, social media at the end of the day is all about appearances. You know, we post, we say, we put out there what we want people to see, and people can make assumptions for that. But at the end of the day, like, they're only seeing a very small part of our lives, a tiny part of our lives. They're literally just seeing that one picture that we took in that 1 minute out of the 24 hours that we're living. So to protect our physical health, mental health, and as well as spiritual health, we have to be careful and also take precautions. So I think that does bring us to the end of the show. And we want to also ask the audience for our future shows, is there anything or any topics that you would want us to talk about? If you have anything that you would want us to particularly cover, or you want us to like discuss, email the account list on the screen, which says info@streamislam.co.uk, and just maybe put in the title or the topic Sisters Speak Ideas if you have anything that you want us to talk about or anything that you want us to discuss on future shows. But yes, a big jazakallah and thank you to Sister Elif for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a very interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully it's benefited everyone who has been listening as well.
No, jazakallah. And from all of us here at Sister Speak, email show topic ideas to info@streamislam. And jazakallah, thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week, same time, same day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.